Hey, so we could talk about how long it took for me to get this second part out. We could talk about how I got sick, then how I had laryngitis for about 2 weeks, meaning I physically could not record. Then we could talk about how it was my birthday. And then right after that, I decided to get my wisdom teeth removed, which is a surgery I vastly underestimated. So then I had to recover from that. And now here we are, after or in the middle of the holiday season. Yeah, so we could talk about that, but let's just get into the video, actually. So this is part 2 of my series with just very general advice of how to navigate toxic relationships. This particular video is for people who tried the tips in part 1 and then decided that going no contact really was the best option, even if it's for a brief amount of time. Or perhaps you didn't even watch the first part, but you know that going no contact is your best option right now. So that's where we are right now. That's what this video is for, is what I'm trying to say. So again, this advice that I'm about to give you isn't coming out of nowhere. I am not by any means a licensed professional, but I have lived this, okay? I have earned and internalized it myself. I have gone to therapy, but that doesn't mean that what works for me works for you. I'm just trying to spread the good word. Have you heard the good news? You can leave those bitches behind. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing. Now for me personally, I have a pretty good track record of cutting people out, whether these are family members, close and far, whether they are coworkers, roommates, friends that I've known for less than 2 years or over a decade. And while that might sound like I have this like ridiculously long no-fly list, it's really just a handful of people who, now looking back, all share certain traits that at best just mean that we're not compatible as people, right? It's just not working between us. And at worst, how do I phrase this? Makes them people that I just find to be miserable and self-centered and lacking self-reflection and awareness in general. That's just my opinion, and I'm not naming names. That's not what we're here to do today. And when you're someone who goes through the world meeting and interacting with a lot of people, I actually think it's pretty healthy to have some very solid boundaries up. Even if it takes a while to figure out where those are, and even if people have to cross the lines for you to realize that, oh, those lines do exist and I need to stick to them. We'll get into that more later, and I kind of went over it in the last video as well. If you relate and you want to leave them behind, the good news is that I've been doing this for years, so I know what it's like to be freshly cut off, to reunite after a cutoff, or to not talk to someone after a cutoff for, again, just like well over a decade at this point. I've been through all of them for different relationships, different things apply. And if you're one of those people who the idea of cutting people off makes you a little bit sad because in your head you've created this ideal version of a relationship that you want with that person, but it's not matching reality because that person is not who you're trying to make them so that they match the daydream instead of changing your mindset to match reality, I can't help you. I can't help you get therapy, and I'm being so serious. But maybe, if you want to stick around, there's something in here that will be of some use to you regardless. Also, it just started storming, so if you hear that in the background, enjoy. It's like thunder ambiance, ASMR, whatever the hell. So let's hop back into what to do after you have decided to go no contact with toxic people, whether that's just people causing friction in your life or it's just a relationship that you no longer want to pour any time, energy, grief, confusion, frustration, any of that into anymore. That's where we are. Let's go. You've left. You still hurt. Now what? Block them. So the first step is a classic, dare I say, in this digital age, a cliche. And I mean, maybe you don't have any social media if you're doing a digital detox, as I aim to do. It's a classic return to sender type of situation. Okay, Elvis fans and the spiritual girlies will get it, but I digress. This is the first of my tips because it is probably the most important one. And do you want to know how I know how important it is? Because I didn't do it when I should have, and I have suffered. Do you hear me? I have suffered, so I'm sharing this with you so that hopefully you do not suffer as I have. And even worse than the suffering, I look like a damn idiot. So for the love of all things good, please save yourself from that embarrassment. Please do it for me. Please do it. Which means blocking them. Get out your phone. Don't look at my stickers. Get out your phone. Block them right now on everything you possibly can. In fact, you might want to do like what I did. Go onto the socials that you've already deleted just to make sure you've blocked them there as well in case you ever re-download those. You don't ever want to see them again. Block them right now. Do it. Here's the thing, friend. You have something that they want. The worst thing that you can do is cut off their access to you. Stop being their dealer of attention, of arguments, of someone to beat up on. Just stop it. Cut them off. And here's the thing. You need space. You decided to do this for you. And the best thing that you can do for you is to block them. Remove access. Stop giving them a way to hurt you. Protect your peace. Have you heard that one before? Or another little fun adage that I've heard recently. The same person who hurt you cannot heal you. That's not in their power. It just isn't. So you're going to have to close them off. And speaking of closure is a myth. It's a state of mind. It cannot be provided by any outside source. So, for your sake, cut them off. Hold on, let me get my cap. Here's the thing. Maybe none of this perfectly fits your situation. If you can't tell, I keep kind of trying to speak in as broad terms as possible so that it can be more applicable to people from all walks of life going through all different situations. But the T is I'm not going to hit it every time. So honestly, I should probably stop worrying about that. But even if you're not perfect either, okay? Even if you rightfully have taken some of the blame for whatever happened. Maybe both of you were toxic. You know what I mean? Because that is also a possibility. You're here right now, which means that you know something has to change. And the only person who you can change is yourself. So if these are the steps that need to be taken, you're already on the right track. Cut them off. And again, even if you don't want to completely cut off contact or that's not possible given your certain situation, taking a break is usually a good thing. The fact is that just about none of us have the self-control that we think that we do. That's normal. It's not a failure. It's not a personality flaw. And to form new habits, we have to shake up our old routines. So no matter your situation, you've decided you need to build a fence. Don't leave the gate open now. That just defeats the point. Basically, even if you know that at some point you're going to have to use that gate to establish a strong foundation for your boundaries that you will later need to enforce, taking some time totally away from the situation is probably the move. So, what do we say? Block them! On to the next. Give yourself time. Okay, so this one is kind of in competition with blocking them as the most important thing to do, at least in my personal opinion. I am someone who struggles with the concept of time. I never feel like I have enough. I never give myself enough time. Do better. by yourself, jump ahead in that lesson. I'm still working on it, but I'm giving you the leg up and telling you now how important it actually is. So the reason that we build boundaries, the reason that we erect that fence is to cultivate some distance, or like I said, some time. I might use those two words kind of interchangeably, but just to insulate ourselves a bit from the situation, make it not so immediate, not happening right in our front yard, as I figuratively say. Time alone will not heal all things, but nothing can heal without time. And it's probably going to suck in the beginning. A lot of the steps that I'm giving you in this video and the last video are work. It's not just easy. And even if it doesn't suck right in the beginning, something later might come up down the line. I don't know your life. I don't know your situation. I wish that I could tell you there won't be any pain from here on out, that building that distance is enough to keep yourself protected forever and always, but that's just not the case. However, this is the next step in the process of avoiding making the same mistakes in the future. And honestly, what helped me understand this is getting older. I just turned 31. That's 3 decades under my belt. I've moved around a lot, starting in my childhood, which meant interacting in a lot of different circles of a lot of different friends. I'm a talker. So I've had to interact with a lot of different kinds of people. Then I bounced around different jobs, different cities and states, rinse and repeat. And I can say with confidence that the more time and chapters of life that you have behind you, under your belt already, the more you appreciate what's right in front of you and how many fresh starts you really do have left. At least that's how it works for me. So you can make a change, big or small, at any point in your life. And one day those stories, those chapters that you decided to end will be so far behind you that you can look back on them and it just feels like a story, like it happened to someone else or in a different lifetime. And in a way that will be true. One day you might struggle to remember the names of the people who hurt you. The details will get lost in all that time and space that you have established between you and them. But this is nothing that can be forced. You cannot just make it so by willpower alone. It has got to be moved through one moment at a time, and that's the difficult part, unfortunately. I suggest looking into mindfulness practices because that's what helped me get right with the reality of time and how much we have, which is a good thing and also sometimes really difficult. And as someone with anxiety and who is, again, in the process of getting diagnosed for ADHD, this became even more important in multiple facets of my life. There really is only so much you can do for yourself as far as actions to take when you are trying to grow or heal from a bad situation. And again, I have to stress, you cannot force a wound to close. I don't care what doctors you see or meds you take, and that doesn't mean that the doctors and the meds aren't important. The common denominator for those things to work like they should is giving it time. And if you're like me, being told that there's nothing you can do in order to fix it can be really hard to live with. I have some control issues, and in this first world country, hustle culture, blah, 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 being in charge of our own destiny, individualism, we really do think that it's a matter of willpower. It's not. It is a matter of time. And that's the reality, whether you like it or not. But it's a great opportunity to practice. You can notice how you feel and what comes up when you struggle and when you feel like it's easy at each step along the way. It's a really good opportunity to get to know yourself, which we're actually going to get into later. Similarly, giving yourself time feeds into another really vital part of going no contact. Sometimes there is pushback from other well-meaning people who want you to try to reconcile, to reconnect. These could be the toxic parties themselves, or it could just be bystanders for one reason or another. When you focus on giving yourself time, you are able to step back from any situation, any interaction, and assess. Assess your gut reaction, how your body feels, what emotions are bubbling up. And even though you, like me, might have an immediate response ready to fire off, maybe don't do that. Maybe don't react, and instead take time to respond. If you give yourself time to think over whether this is even worth your engagement and your energy, and then what the outcome is that you really want and how to get there, you're on a much better footing than if you just start that vicious cycle right over again by lashing out or gaslighting yourselves, whatever it is. So whatever the case may be, take your time. Again, ask me how I know that this is important. Do you remember the step before when I said I ended up looking like an idiot and caused myself to suffer further? I didn't have to. If I had just given myself time to craft a response instead of just reacting to, honestly, bait. I did what they wanted me to do, man. Then I would probably look back on the experience in a very different way. However, I learned from it, which is really all that you can do, and now I'm moving forward and sharing it with you. But still, I'm really trying to spare you here. Learn from my mistakes. That's the point of this whole series. Turn your nurturing instincts inward. Everything you normally love giving to everyone else, give it to yourself. All of that energy and time you would be pouring into a relationship, pour it into yourself. Do I really need to elaborate here? Michaela Long, bless her, once said that when she's feeling down, she likes to think of her body as a pet. And I think about that a lot, actually. There's all of these cute little catchphrases floating around the internet right now, like be kind to your mind, you are enough, you're doing your best, and all of these little mantras that aim to turn your inner critic into your new best friend. And all of that does apply. Pick the little phrase that works best for you, I suppose. But how do we actually do that? Self-care is important, and I'm not talking about consumption. I'm not really big into the consumption culture that has become synonymous with self-care. So I'm not saying to take an everything shower for 4+ hours and do plasticky face masks and treat yourself by overindulging on unhealthy snacks just for a quick dopamine hit. And also, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things, but they're not medicine. They don't even scratch the surface. They are quite literally like slapping a Band-Aid over whatever it is that you're feeling right there. They're just a distraction. And again, if we feed back into, I'm going to be doing a lot of looping back to previous analogies, so stay with me. If we feed back into the doctor and meds analogy from before, these acts of self-care are just the spoonful of sugar helping that medicine go down. They're the lollipop you get after getting your shots as a kid. It's just to make you feel better about doing the work part, the part that sucks. And there's value to that for sure, but that should not be the emphasis in your plan to heal and grow, because at the end of the day, there's no nutritional value. So when I say self-care, what I mean is care for yourself. Care about yourself. Care about your feelings, your health, what you're thinking, what you want and need. For a lot of people, this is the natural default, and they're probably gonna think that I'm crazy for even having to say that. But for folks like me, for folks who might find themselves in a situation where they have to go no contact, for example, that's not our first instinct. It feels wrong. It feels selfish. And that's okay. Lean into it. Be selfish right now, if that's what it takes. Because being selfless only got you right here, watching this video, didn't it? And whatever comes up when you are caring for yourself, when you are talking to yourself, when you are sitting with yourself, accept it. Don't judge it. Listen with an open heart and an open mind. Again, give yourself what others never did. To get through this life, like really truly to not only survive, but to thrive, you are going to have to find yourself precious and worth protecting. But how do we get there? I'm so glad you asked. get to know you, and build self-trust. Like the other steps, this is the natural progression from the last one we were talking about. Even though they sort of feed into each other and you can kind of flip them however you want, whichever comes first for you. Spend some time with your thoughts. Look into inner child work, shadow work. Get a journal. Ask yourself questions. Run through your memories. Hold off on the judgment and just explore. Act as though you are a I completely just blanked out on the word, but act like you're a third party. Where are you hurting? Not just in your mind or your soul, but in your body. A lot of these emotions come up in a physical way. What do you need? Where did you mess up? What are you proud of yourself for? Where and who do you want to be, and how do you make that happen? And again, this feeds back into that last step, okay? The only way that you are going to get honest answers, the only way that you are going to gain anything from this process is if you actually genuinely care about your own well-being, if you find yourself precious. And for some people, it's coming in with that mindset that guides their experience, whereas for others, it's coming in with a more scientific third-party mindset that then guides their way towards the caring, towards the love. I hope that makes sense. So if you've already worked on how you feel about yourself and you like yourself, you're treating yourself like a pet, like a friend, like a child, whatever it is, you can explore even deeper and really get to the root of a lot of these issues without your judgment and all of that tendency to beat ourselves up and make ourselves feel worse getting in the way, because that is not of value to you here. You can take responsibility for yourself and your actions without constantly berating or punishing yourself. Those two things are different. In the last video, I mentioned going to therapy and having a solid support system if those things are available to you. And I still say, obviously, those are great resources to have. And that runs through this step as well. But even if you don't have anyone else available, you've got you, babe. And you always will. So work on developing that trust with yourself. Again, this might be hard. This might go against every instinct you have. This might be completely the opposite from how you've lived your life until now. You gotta try, because the way you've lived your life until now hasn't been working. I'm sorry, that sounded so harsh, but I just mean, in the context of this video, getting here today. Whatever you were doing wasn't working, so you've got to change it. That's all I'm trying to say. It can also help to focus on what did you learn from this toxic experience? What would you do differently? What are things that you will now look for in future relationships, and what are the things that you will absolutely avoid? Getting right with yourself is the antidote to being gaslit. Spend as much time as you can inside of yourself working it all out. Get in there. And as much as I warn you that it might be hard, it can also be really fun and freeing and enlightening and introduce you to these glowing, wonderful, creative, joyful nuggets inside of you that you didn't even know were there. Take breaks, of course, as with all things. You don't have to go spending 8 hours every night writing in your diary and trying to psychoanalyze every small instance in your memory from your childhood. Just work on this relationship with yourself as you would with another person. And remember, give it time. I separated this step from the last one because if at any point when you are diving into doing the work on yourself inside, which is what I'd consider this step, when you take a break, you're probably going to have to step back into the previous step of caring for yourself. And again, that doesn't mean just like slapping sugar on an open wound, but what it does mean is embracing what you've done so far, giving yourself your flowers, taking credit for the work that you've done, and letting yourself rest. That's what someone who cares about someone does for someone. And so I'm saying you should do it for yourself. Just don't mistake the sugar for the medicine. Speak up and out. Act on it. So just like when we're setting boundaries while we're still trying to navigate a salvageable relationship, we are of course going to have to set boundaries once that relationship is over. And yes, of course, that means not opening up communication with the toxic people involved, but it also means checking yourself and keeping up whatever boundaries you've decided to have as you move into the future and meet new people. So that's why this step and block them are different. Do you remember the fence analogy I used way back at the beginning of this video? Well, you built it to protect yourself, right? To keep certain people at a safe distance. Well, that whole thing kind of falls apart if you just start inviting people in willy-nilly who are going to treat you the same exact way. And if you're like me, it's not a one-time thing. Codependency and trauma-based patterns don't just disappear because you woke up one day and said, actually, this isn't working, let me cut some people off. The only way to stop that cycle from repeating is to be stern with yourself and with any new people you're trying to welcome into your life. This means listening to yourself. So, after the last couple of steps, you've built a good relationship with you. You're not judgy. You really do care about yourself, not just how you feel and what you want to accomplish in this life, but also what you need. This leads to you trusting your gut, trust your instincts. If you find yourself being reminded of assholes past, stop, give yourself time, and listen. And on the flip side, if you are worried that in your interactions with a new person, you are leaning too heavily on past trauma and projecting something onto them that they did not actually earn, give yourself time, stop, and reanalyze. A good antidote for that is actually to enlist a third party to help you check and make sure that you're not actually crazy. But do not discount your inner voice. For a lot of us, that's how we got in this mess. Don't let yourself become a doormat again. Don't catch yourself with that gate unlocked, open to just anybody, flapping in the wind. Do not beat your intuition down in the interest of being perceived as nice or approachable or because you're afraid of being alone. All that'll do is lead to more heartbreak, more to have to work through, and you'll have to repeat all of these steps all over again. And it was my therapist who gave the suggestion to make a list of traits that I want to seek out in new friends, as well as a list of traits that I really want to avoid that I shared with you earlier. But obviously there's some wiggle room. Individual, real human people are not going to hit every single item on your list every single time. That's just not how the world works. But the moral here, the point I am trying to convey to you, is don't prioritize a stranger over yourself. If it's even a little weird, even if you can't really put your finger on why, it is in your power to leave. Even if you feel bad, even if you feel like you should give them a chance in order to be perceived as a good person, there's no trophy for that, okay? Listen to yourself, listen to your gut, listen to any little alarm bells, and follow through. Speak up in that moment. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely walk away from a new budding relationship, but it does mean that you can put your foot down and say, hey, what you just said or did actually makes me really uncomfortable, or what have you, and I don't appreciate it. So moving forward, just be aware of that. Don't let it build up over time. Don't let them get away with it once or twice here and there, and then train them to think that they can get away with it for all time. Generally speaking, that only means their behavior will get worse and worse as they learn that they can take advantage of you. Don't let your own resentment grow from not saying something. The only way to squash it out is to get ahead of it. The dogs are barking. Don't throw all of that self-work and self-care away and betray your own needs and interests. Open up that line of communication. Again, you don't need to jump to any crazy conclusions or necessarily cut people completely off, but, use that gate to filter out the behavior that you just won't stand for. You can even share your past experiences if you feel comfortable doing so to give some people some additional context. For example, you can be like, hey, you've rescheduled our meetup twice now. I'd actually prefer you being direct with me instead of standing me up a third time because that's my limit. And after that, I'll just be moving on. I hope you understand. That's a totally reasonable interaction, and it puts the ball in their court to respond how they will. If they decide to tell you directly that something's up, You can both leave on good terms. If they really are trying to make things work, then hey, you'll meet up the next time. And regardless of the reason, if something really does come up the third time, or if they're just trying to get out of the interaction without hurting your feelings, you can move on. You don't have to sit and feel bad about considering your own time and energy valuable. Say it's a missed connection, whatever, it happens. But for all intents and purposes, what you've been shown by this person, even if it is just a genuine misunderstanding or mistake, is that you value yourself. And now the great news is you're free from that. You can move on and instead hang out with people who never stand you up again. This is just an example, obviously. Or this is what I have to focus on. I really have to keep an eye on my urge to help people because, as I've said a couple of times, what I consider normal is clearly not. It's a little bit above and beyond, apparently. And that doesn't mean that I'm never going to help people ever again, but it does mean that I am going to check myself. You know, what can I offer? How can I help in a way that won't make me feel used and underappreciated if they never, ever, ever offer any help to me back? And there's plenty of stuff that falls somewhere on the spectrum in the middle. At the end of the day, it's really up to you. What falls into the category of I am never doing that again versus all right. Versus, you know what? I really like the fact that I am this type of person and this toxic interaction is not going to change me. But maybe before we move to level 3 of this relationship, I'm going to have to see some reciprocation of some kind. Because even as me, someone who's generally outspoken and considers herself a pretty good judge of character, my kryptonite has always been that slow burn sob story that builds up over time. I keep feeding in little good deeds that get bigger and bigger and bigger until all of a sudden they're living in my house. How did this happen? Well, I had to put all of those impulses in check, and I didn't. And I'm not fucking doing that again. So for me personally, from now on, I'll put in, the little things here and there. But after a certain point, I'm going to have to stop, give myself time, check in with myself, see how we're doing, analyze what's going on, what the thought process is, and revert back to my list of, is this person and is this relationship worth doing more? Or am I going to really have to see some reciprocity before I continue forward, before I really truly know that I can trust this person and that this relationship is a two-way street? And I honestly think that I could have avoided a lot of grief in a lot of different relationships if I had spoken up sooner. So that's the act on it part. Again, you don't have to completely cut somebody off just because they keep asking you for favors or they're always struggling, but you can speak up and say, hey, I can't do that for you. Or I'm not comfortable in this situation, or what you said or did really crossed a line. Whatever. Speak up for yourself. And I think that's reasonable, don't you? So make your list. What's fine and what's not reasonable anymore until, you've at least had some reassurance. Versus, what's completely off the table moving forward? What is absolutely not acceptable anymore? What are some things that will signal to you that you need to stop and call out that behavior as it's happening in the moment? Versus, what is a definitive sign from that person that, oh no, you no longer want to pursue a relationship with them, period. So remember, because this was a pretty long section. 1, relationships are supposed to go both ways. 2, you are allowed to walk away from any relationship at any time for any reason. You don't even need to explain yourself. And 3, you owe it to yourself, who you care about deeply. You care about your well-being. You care about growing and healing as a person, to speak up and or take action when something does not feel right. And even though that responsibility falls solely on your shoulders, I think it's pretty cool to have it, to know that that really is in your power, in your control, your own actions, and how you move forward as you meet new people and develop new relationships going through your life. Now you also have the power to speak out about what happened to you, your experiences, what they did to you, and maybe sometimes what you did as well. And this could actually end up attracting exactly the kind of people you need in your life and driving away exactly the kind of people you do not need in your life anymore. For me personally, the power of using my own voice has helped me to heal and to grow, to drive away the exact people I don't need to be fucking with anymore, and also to build relationships with people who get it, with people who are going to support me and want to check in with me and help me on this journey to getting better and staying safe. So don't write off the power of your voice either. Let's recap once more. Block them, block them, block them, block them, block them. Give yourself time and space to explore your feelings and cultivate a response, not just a harmful, triggered reaction. Turn your nurturing instincts inward. The care and consideration you'd give to others, give those things to yourself. Get to know you and build self-trust as your foundation for honoring your inner voice and not sliding back into old, toxic relationships or habits. Speak up and out. Act on it. Hold your boundaries firm, even with new people. End of video disclaimer, and just a reminder, I am not a licensed professional. These are just tips I learned through my own experience. This is just what works for me. Take what you need, leave what you don't. There's a ton more resources and advice out there, and I really urge you to research and explore those and find someone who you relate to, whose story resonates with you, and who phrases things in a way that really drive these points home and is just the most useful to you. I hope this helps someone. If there's any additional tips that you would like to share, feel free to leave them in the comments below. The entire reason that I'm doing this, even though I'm still a teeny tiny brand new YouTube channel who posts too far in between each video, but that's because I really love talking to strangers on the internet. Literally my favorite thing about the couple of times I went viral on TikTok is talking to strangers on the internet. I loved it. Also, apparently I wrote in that I wanted to add some bonus pictures of myself from the day after my wisdom tooth surgery, so here, have a palate cleanser. Anyway, if you're celebrating holidays or whatever, do it well. I've got more review content and rants about life stuff coming up in the new year. And I do plan to figure out a more regular upload schedule, if that's even possible for me. Bye! What are you doing, small boy? He's watching the raindrops. Oh my goodness. Yes, but I have to kick you out because I'm doing something.